I have definitely been in the rooms and been screamed at and told that I'm the reason their eating disorder clinics are full because I'm letting all these people who clearly they're obese, they have an eating disorder, like there's no connection
Wow.
between it. Yeah. So if you get into
Huh.
this area, you do need to have some conversations sometimes that are uncomfortable.
Hi, I'm Kim Tolson and I'm the traveling therapist. It's my passion to teach therapists how to navigate online private practices and multiple income streams so they can travel the world. I'm a digital nomad with a virtual insurance-based private therapy practice and a multi-six-figure coaching business. I'm obsessed with entrepreneurship and developing tools that can help therapists live an adventurous lifestyle. In this podcast, I will discuss my journey as a digital nomad. I'll chat with other traveling therapists and help you navigate the complexities of running an online insurance-based practice. I'm so glad to have you with me on this journey. Managing a successful private practice can be challenging, even if you have all the skills and experience you need to support clients. Most training programs offer little to no guidance on running your own business. That's why Alma gives clinicians the tools they need to build a thriving private practice. When you join Alma, you can get credentialed with major insurance payers within 45 days, as well as guaranteed payment within 2 weeks of each session. You can also attract clients who are the right fit for your practice with a free profile in Alma's searchable directory. As you build your caseload, Alma also offers time-saving tools and administrative support, so you can spend less time on paperwork and more time delivering great care to your clients. Visit helloalma.com/Kim to download your free guide to identifying and connecting with clients who are the right fit for your practice. That's helloalma.com/KYM to get your guide.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Traveling Therapist Podcast. I am really excited today to have Ashlyn Douglass-Barnes here with us. So she's got a cool story. I'm excited to share this with you guys. She's sort of come up with a really innovative way to, remain a therapist, kind of take a break if you're on that burnout track, and also be able to travel while you do it. So I thought she'd be a perfect guest for this. I'm super excited to have you here today, Ashlyn. Thank you for coming. And I always like to start out and just say, so how did you go from being just a traditional therapist to a traveling therapist?
Well, that is quite a story. But in 2019, I was swimming in debt. And my husband and I were sitting talking about how are we ever going to dig out of this hole that we've dug ourselves. I think this is a common conversation amongst many couples. And I suggested that I do Uber Eats. And he looked at me and he said, I'm pretty sure you'd make a lot more money if you just finally went and did private practice. Do it. And I said, I don't know. I have this full-time job and I don't want to be a competition to them. And they've always been so kind to me. And he's like, just figure it out. At the same exact time, because the universe loves to do this to us, we went to a baby shower later that day. And the woman standing next to us, introducing herself, was my husband's coworker's wife. She worked for a local bariatric surgeon. And she said, your husband had mentioned that you had the surgery. And do you know anyone who does, the evals, or your therapist, right? You do that. And the light bulb went off. Right?
Oh,
so
wow.
I said,
oh, I have goosebumps.
Yeah, I said, perfect. So I said, okay, so here's how I'm going to tell my boss that I'm starting a private practice because I'm a clinical director for a nonprofit. And it's not going to be a competition because all I'm going to do there is bariatric evaluations. And now I finally have an in with our biggest bariatric surgeon, which I had attempted to do, but had never been successful. So all those planets and the stars line. And so I start and everything is amazing. And then the pandemic hits. So I'm working 7 days a week with no breaks because no one could go anywhere or do anything.
Wow.
And everyone's lives are falling apart, including my own. And so ironically, in the meantime, we dug out of debt. We had a down payment. During the pandemic, we bought a home. We had an emergency savings. Everything, was great, but I was burning myself to the ground. And so my husband and I sat down and I said, even though normally I'm not quite a traveler, because travel had always made me a little nervous, I said, I think we need to go somewhere and do something. And he was like, okay, where do you want to go? And I said, I don't know, but I want to go somewhere where they take care of me. And he's like, what? I'm like, maybe like an all-inclusive. And he goes, okay, well, what about COVID? I said, we'll just find a brand that's very conscious and we'll just go. And he was like, okay. So we did. So we found this Caribbean brand, all-inclusive, and we planned a trip, and it was just what I needed. And that's how I fell into being able to balance all of the stuff I do with traveling, and how I became more comfortable to be able to start traveling again. I had fearlessly traveled as a teenager. I lived briefly in Mexico, and kind of prior to the current situation in Mexico, but I loved the idea of it, but it just made me really nervous. And so that was kind of a good way to kind of put my toe back into the travel world. And then, of course, got bit by the travel bug. And we've been traveling ever since. And like I mentioned, we're literally about to leave for a 2-week trip to France, which I'm so excited to Provence. And so now I've like, okay, well, this is the way that I balance and make sure that I don't burn out.
That's amazing. Yes. I mean, I talk about being a traveling therapist and working, but there's ways to do it, right? The other way is, make it so you have a business, like we're going to talk about your business, where I don't know if you're going to work while you're in France, but you can structure this thing so you can take 2 weeks at a time, 3 weeks at a time, and not even have to work if you're structuring things correctly in your business, if you want to do it that way. I do it the other way, where I just like work and work in the mornings, travel, and do stuff in the evenings, that kind of thing. But everybody's different with it. So will you work in France, or are you going to not work at all?
I probably will. And the way that I can, and I'll kind of explain the business structure here too.
Yeah.
So one of the really good things about bariatric evaluations is that for the most part, they're one and done or one and refer. So you are in charge of the evaluation only, but you're not necessarily involved in the aftercare if you don't want to be. So for me, I am, but that's not true of everyone. So if you're someone who would like to go to travel an extensive amount of traveling, you would need one day, probably once a week, where you have stable internet. So you could travel all the other days, price yourself correctly so you make enough money in the day that you have stable internet, and then you should be able to kind of work or not work the rest of the time, but have the money, especially depending on the country you're in. So for my friends that are kind of continuous travelers, they tend to stay more in like South America where it's more affordable. So that way they could work only that one day that they have stable internet, which that's always the concern is, where am I going to have stable internet to be able to do these things?
I know it. Yeah, that is so true. So how long does somebody need for a bariatric evaluation, like a clinician? How long does just that one and done kind of evaluation usually take?
So the way that I have created templates around it, it takes about an hour because you're gathering the majority of the information prior to ever meeting the client. So the way that you make the time the most efficient is templating your evaluation, but also templating the questions that they're asked. And then you're spending most of your time together, that face-to-face, clarifying anything that they didn't give you enough information or wasn't clear. And then psychoeducation, which is the main part of bariatric evaluation. So probably should go back and explain what a bariatric.
I know. I was going to say we jumped right into it.
Right.
We jumped right into it. But yeah, I think we should back up and just like explain a little bit about what this is, because it's such a cool model. I think it's a really neat thing, and it really fits in so well with the traveling therapist lifestyle. So we kind of jumped ahead a little bit.
Yeah. So I guess anyone doing evaluation only, regardless of the type of evaluation, could set it up that way. But I guess I was so excited to explain why you can go and travel the world.
Yeah, so let's back up a little bit and talk about it. So you had mentioned you were a bariatric patient as well, right? So I guess you already had that interest in this to begin with. And then can you just maybe talk a little bit about that? And then, you had that magical moment where the worlds collided and you were like, I can do this. And then, what is the program and how does this work and all of that? I'd love to just talk about that some.
So 11 years ago, I had bariatric surgery after kind of a series of medical situations where I became anaphylactically allergic to medication that was kind of keeping me going, essentially not becoming diabetic. And so I ended up at Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville. And so eventually with a referral to the bariatric program. So I was one of their youngest people at the time. It's more common to be in your 20s and 30s nowadays, but it wasn't then. And so the way that bariatric evaluations work is every single person who's having bariatric surgery and it's going through their insurance, and sometimes even surgeons will require, even if it's not going through insurance, has to have an evaluation done by a mental health professional. And that could be a psychologist, LMFT, LMHC, LCSW like myself, LPC, or whatever your terminal degree is or license is for your state. So the ASMBS, which is our governing body, it's the American Society of Metabolic and Bariatric Surgery. They just require that we are fully licensed and we have the ability to diagnose and we have some kind of specific training to bariatrics. It does not say what the training is. It doesn't say, yeah. So they really take, which I appreciate, a non-gatekeeping stance. They do not want less people being able to provide the evaluations. They want more people to provide the evaluations. So 11 years ago, when I had surgery, it never occurred to me that I would actually be doing this, because in my head, I'm like, well, I don't have this all figured out. How am I going to help people have this all figured out? But then I realized that there are a lot of people doing the evaluations that didn't quite know what maybe to focus on or talk about. And I could use some of that personal experience without it being about me, but about like, hey, these are the reasons that you need to get back into therapy. So if you end up with cross addiction or you're noticing disordered eating behaviors, like those are little red flags and you need to come back to therapy, because the point of the evaluations is to educate and establish care. So that way, they can give informed consent. So our portion of that evaluation is to ensure that the clients can give informed consent and that they know what they're getting into. You can't consent to something that you don't understand, which is why we have to do the education series to ensure that they know what they're getting into.
Nice. Oh, that's amazing. Right. Yeah. Because even as you were saying that, I was like, gosh, there might be people out there just jumping into this that don't have any background in it at all, So okay. I'm assuming your training like helps with that. Does your training meet the requirements of the
ASMBS? Yeah. So a couple years ago, decided that there wasn't really any training on the market. And so I kind of thought about it and I put it on the back burner. I'm like, who am I to be the trainer? Again, that imposter, that comes up a lot with at imposter syndrome. What business do you have providing education to people? But what I figured out in all the years that I did the evaluations is I was updating my template and making it more efficient and figuring out what to say or not to say, how to evaluate. And so a friend of mine who was burning out and was like, hey, can I do those evals that you do? Could you teach me? I'll pay you money. You can teach me. And I said, you know what? It would be much easier if someone could learn from all my mistakes versus having to, learn them on their own over time, or I used to spend like 2 hours with the person. And then it would be like another hour creating this like letter. And then once I got my EMR, I just created a template. And so I could do it almost while I'm seeing the client. Documenting at the same time that you see the client. So almost got that, but not quite. And I created scripting around the education series. So I sat down with a bariatric surgeon, made sure that they agreed with everything essentially that I was saying. So it's really, the training was made to be going from knowing nothing about it, to being able to conduct a bariatric evaluation. And I also talk about advertising, networking. The good thing about bariatrics too, it's a really clear client population. Like you're targeting bariatric surgeons. Your relationships are going to be with bariatric surgeons. Your website, your business cards, everything is going to be, your SEO is almost set up for you because it's only one thing. It's only bariatrics. So for my business, I made sure I had bariatrics in the name. So the name of my private practice is Advanced Bariatric Counseling, because I also wanted a way when people called, because I take every insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, everything. I get a lot of people that are calling that are needing therapy for something completely not related to bariatrics. And I wanted to soften the blow when I said, I'm really sorry, I only see clients who need bariatric surgery. And they would say, oh, that makes sense. I didn't know what that meant in your name. And then nobody's like really mad because it's not. My other business name is Monarch Counseling. So in that business, I'd understand anyone and everyone calls for on that side. But if on the bariatric side, they could say, oh, okay, that makes sense. So it was one in marketing. So it's actually a DBA off my
Oh, nice.
LLC because I wanted the website, I wanted everything to be related to be able to kind of fit in that SEO for
So
people to be
smart.
able to find me, and only the people that I wanted to find me. So for
Yeah.
marketing, this is one where like old school relationship building, old school like paper cards,
Nice.
like you go. So if you were someone who was traveling, so I call it my round the world. So once a quarter. So I'm in Central Florida and I have 2 hours to the East Coast and 2 hours to the West Coast. So
Nice.
Tampa is kind of to one coast, and then there's another coast on the other side. It's like West Palm. So I go 2 hours one direction one day and I hit up every bariatric surgeon on one side, and then 2 hours the other direction and I hit up all the bariatric surgeons on that side. I go to every single surgeon. I bring some little snack. I usually stop at Whole Foods on the way because surgeons are very picky. I bring in berries, and I bring the rest of the office, some muffins or something. And then I bring them my cards. I ask if they need anything, make sure front desk has my cell number. The surgeon has my cell number if they want. I will fulfill any kind of last minute request as long as I'm able to, because that builds relationships with them. They know that they can count on me. Even if maybe normally I wouldn't see someone on that day, I'll kind of go out of my way. That way they know, I'm the one to call. But the good thing is, especially if you're someone you're like, oh, marketing and SEO, like all of that is too much. It's very direct. They need the surgeons cannot do surgery if these evaluations are not done correctly. So if they go to their therapist and they say, hey, they need this like thing from you. If you don't know how to do it, you're going to do that for them, which happens all the time. And then it's wrong.
I did one myself when I was, a long-term client. She's
right.
Obviously needs the surgery. I'm like, I'll do it. I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I knew it was appropriate for her, but that's about all I knew. I didn't know what to include in the letter, or if I could bill for it or anything, so.
Yes, you can. So we'll talk about that too.
I want to hear about that. Yeah.
Yes, from a billing standpoint. So you can do these self-pay or insurance. So just like a normal therapy, we'll start with self-pay. So you really want to figure out what your net or your area tolerance for it is. So you may want to call around and see who does these, how much do they charge? Because it can be really wide. So our area tolerance, there are not too many providers. They're charging self-pay upwards of $355, $450, depending on who's seeing them. And so our tolerance is pretty high in this area. We have 12 surgeons. So we have a lot of people coming, a lot of surgeons. That's just our general area. I have about 22 if I go out kind of to both. So we have quite a few bariatric surgeons in our area. So a little oversaturated on surgeons, but not oversaturated on therapists. So some bariatric surgeons have internal evaluators. You still want to talk to those offices. So I have one office that has an internal employee who's their evaluator, but I am always her conflict of interest, her second opinion. So you still want to follow up with those offices, even though they may not be very fruitful. I still follow up with that office just like I do all others. I make sure I say hello to her, remind her my role, and I'm not stealing people or anything like that. I'm just your second opinion. You got someone you just need a little extra eyes on, or conflict of interest, which they should always be referring out for. So that's particularly a hospital system where there's only one bariatric surgeon in their hospital system. So their employees can only use that surgeon because of how they're. So I know there's going to be conflict of interest along the way if someone in the office wanted to have surgery or someone's family member wanted to have surgery. So, but otherwise, the rest of my offices, they don't have anybody in office, so they need me. The flip side, so that's self-pay. So again, market tolerance may be down, maybe towards 200, and maybe as high as 600 for some of those higher areas, maybe New York City or California, where therapy rates are higher anyways. What I always tell people is in the end, it's probably going to take between an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours in the beginning when you're getting used to it. So you, at the very least, you need to charge 2 hours of your time. So whatever your normal therapy rate is times 2. For insurance, one of the things so there is no specialty code for bariatrics. So it's just a 9071. It's just a regular intake. So whatever the insurance normally pays you for that, but you can charge accordance to all of our insurance, and I take it all, I can charge for the paperwork. So I charge a $50 fee to complete the paperwork that is necessary for the surgeon. So even though my overall pay would be less than another therapist doing self-pay, my volume. So I work more on volume, and I also have people that work for me as contractors. So I do better on volume versus someone who maybe they're just doing it themselves, or they just want to do a couple, so they're going to have a higher rate for it, where I'm more on a model of volume. So I want to be the sole provider for the high volume bariatric surgeons. So I need to make sure that I have contractors who can take on that work.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so I'm actually the only provider within like 50-mile radius for one of the Medicaids, which is weird.
Wow. Yeah.
So
oh my
very
gosh.
much honestly, Medicaid's one of my best payers, which is kind of funny.
It's like that in Virginia too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I don't know if you guys have Medicaid down here has this specialty eval, which it's called a in-depth assessment. They have a specialized code for that. So I actually can bill that for these evals because they're specialty evals. So they're the only ones. It's not specific to bariatrics, but it just means that you had to, and I read the Medicaid manual like 5 times. I'm like, I just don't want to get audited for this. And I always thought a lot of them they would, but they never have. So that's been good. But the thing about the clients that you're going to work with bariatrics is that they have never interacted with mental health and potentially never will in the future. Because everyone has to get it, you're seeing literally the entire population. So they sometimes need a little more education on why it costs what it costs, or how the insurance works. They may be someone who, for very legitimate reasons, have avoided healthcare because of fat bias. And so they might have never used their insurance before, and now they're trying to understand why they have a high deductible. So you have to have a little more patience and understanding sometimes. Sometimes people are also very angry. They don't understand why they're being forced to see a therapist. And so a very little bit of psychoeducation surrounding, like, my goal isn't diagnosing you, like you're not necessarily going to be in long-term treatment. We're just making sure that you have the best information possible. I usually bring up body autonomy, that people have the right to make their own decisions about their body. And then most people calm down a bit. I will say that the bar for it isn't pass fail. And this was kind of something that many years ago, the belief was like, we're passing too many people. We need to ensure that people have all this therapy, and very similar to kind of that move away from gatekeeping for gender affirming care. So we're on that same track. Like, people still have body autonomy. They have a right to make a decision about their bodies. We just want them to make sure that they have enough information to make the right decision. So we are not telling people to have surgery or not have surgery. We're making sure they understand how it works and what's expected of them after surgery to be successful. And most importantly, when to return to therapy if they need it in the future. So I have definitely been in the rooms and been screamed at and told that I'm the reason their eating disorder clinics are full, because I'm letting all these people who clearly, if they're obese, they have an eating disorder, like, there's no connection. With it. Yeah. So if you get into this area, you do need to have some conversations sometimes that are uncomfortable. I've been in Facebook groups where things have blown up a little bit, and, that I'm not, I don't know, all sorts of different things, which is fascinating to me, because we can all agree on body autonomy for a lot of things. And then surgery, people shouldn't be able to make their own decisions. But the good news is that if you don't have, kind of bringing that all the way around, if you don't have a training in eating disorders or in bariatric specific, that is okay. You are not, if you need a referral, you would complete that referral, or you would refer them back potentially to the surgeon who may have the referral, or the insurance company. So the way that we set up in the training too, which is kind of helpful to think, we think of it as red, orange, yellow, green. Green is no issue, adios, have a wonderful time, good luck, you're going to do fine. Yellow is, I have some suggestions, take it or leave it. It may be helpful. So a lot of times those are mental health related. Doesn't seem anything so serious that we need to do something about it right now. But I really recommend that we take a look at some of this stuff concurrently, like while you're moving through the process. Then there's orange. That's going to be like refusal to complete substance abuse treatment. So someone comes in actively abusing or misusing drugs or alcohol. They're choosing not to get treatment. So it's technically a yellow, because if they get treatment, they can move forward. But if they don't, it's becoming orange. So we are going to recommend substance abuse treatment, and they're going to need to come back to us when they've completed it. This also may be active eating disorders. If someone identifies that they have bulimia, we would want them to seek out treatment complete treatment, come back to us. Compulsive gambling behaviors, same thing. I just had that come up last week. So we got him set up in some treatment, and he's going to come back and see me when he's done. And then red, which is really the no treatment options, cannot go forward, is going to be dementia. You cannot give informed consent if you have dementia or otherwise not being able to give informed consent, or severe neurodevelopmental. That's what we call it now? Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't keep up with the terminology.
Yeah. What we used to call MMR. If you did have those intellectual disabilities, maybe that's what we call it now, you could still move forward as long as the person caregiver, like the people around you, are able to keep up with what needs to be done. Because sometimes if we don't do surgery, you will then be unable to be cared for in your home. And then are we really doing a disservice to you, institutionalizing you? Right. So, and in the training, I'll talk specifically, like, how do you make those decisions? How do you liability share? Who do you talk to make sure that that is the best thing forward? How to get surgeons involved in those decisions? Because ultimately, we are not saying that this person is a good candidate for surgery. That's medical person's decision. We're just saying they have the ability to make informed consent and they know what they're getting into. So to me, that takes a lot of liability off of us, because I don't know who's able to have surgery or not from a medical standpoint. I just know this person is able to make informed decisions about their health. They are in a place that they can.
Wow, that is so interesting. I have 1,000 questions. I'm like, gosh, I don't want to like do your whole training right here, but it's so interesting to me. Because like, what is the primary diagnosis for somebody for the insurance company? I'm just curious. Adjustment disorder. Oh, okay.
Because their physical health is getting to a point where they have to make a decision to have surgery or not. So usually when they come to see me, there's been a change in physical health that now is is now making it so if they don't make the decision to have surgery, their life will be impacted by it.
Building a private practice can be challenging. I know for me, when I was starting out, I had no idea how to get referrals. I had no idea how to manage paperwork. I knew nothing about insurance billing. The whole process was really daunting. Building a private practice can be challenging, to say the least. I remember when I was starting out, I had no idea how to get referrals. I had no idea how to navigate insurance. I had no idea even what paperwork was required. So growing a caseload, navigating insurance, and managing billing and paperwork all take significant amounts of time. And that's all in addition to delivering great care to your clients. That's why Alma gives clinicians the tools they need to build a thriving private practice. When you join their insurance program, you can get credentialed within 45 days and access to enhanced reimbursement rates. They also handle all the paperwork, from eligibility checks to claim submissions, and they guarantee payment within 2 weeks of each appointment. So in addition to their insurance program, Alma also offers time-saving tools and administrative support, so you can spend less time on paperwork and more time delivering great care to your clients and traveling the world. Learn more about building a thriving private practice with Alma at helloalma.com/Kim. That's hello, ALMA.com/KYM to get started.
We used to use this fabulous code FO6.31, my favorite, which is mood disorder due to known physiological condition. Which
yes.
A lot of the insurances don't like it anymore. Medicare knocked it out, and Medicare knocked out a bunch of diagnoses. They knocked that out. Some of the commercials still allow it. To me, it's probably the most accurate one. I've never had someone come in and not have a symptom of any mood disorder. Most people at the time they come to see me, they are not happy about how things have progressed. And so they meet best criteria is FO631, but for the most part, they're either going to be adjustment with depressed or adjustment with anxiety. So clients where their mental health or their physical health is causing anxiety. Now, if I don't do something bad is going to happen and I'm preoccupied with it. Or I can't, on the depressed side, I cannot do the things I want to do. I can't be in my life the way I want to be. I live in Orlando, and I can't tell you how many people come and they're like, I'm like, what is one of the questions I ask? What is a how do I word that? What is something you're looking forward to that has nothing to do with exercise, like physical ability?
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes they'll tell me, I want to take my children to the Disney Universal because
Yes.
or they've been where they couldn't fit on the ride. And so they really want to be able to go on a plane again, traveling. They want to go on a plane again. They literally have not been on a plane since the 90s because they're too afraid to be on a plane, or they want to, no one's telling me they want to be a Victoria's Secret supermodel. People are telling me very realistic, I want to go on a plane. I want to buy a bathing suit and feel confident. I want to, go to Universal and not worry that the ride isn't going to click. They're usually, very realistic things, but that is definitely diagnosis wise. Those are probably the ones you're going to pick up. And then if they have any previous diagnosis, you can use that as well. And so evaluations are not failed. Again, you don't fail people because they're in mental health treatment or they have a mental health diagnosis, because they've gotten the treatment or they're currently in treatment. So a lot of times people are like, oh, I don't want to tell you, like I have a therapist. I'm like, great. You've made my life so much easier. Check box. You're currently in therapy. That's great, because that helps us know if things go awry in the future, you're more likely to seek out help, because I know you already did.
You already did. Right. You're predisposed to it.
Yeah. So I'm more likely to seek out treatment, which puts me in a good place, because I'm like, good, I know that you would more likely seek out treatment.
Now, do you give recommendations? Like, is there a certain number of therapy sessions they should follow up on if they're like in one of those yellow or orange categories, or do you not even mess with that part of it?
No, you don't mess with that part. And you cannot, so the ASMBS has made a statement on this. You cannot require a certain amount of therapy prior to giving clearance. So you can't say, you can't make blanket statements. Like you have to see me 10 times before I'll do clearance. And there are bariatric therapists who do this, because that's considered predatory. So you are forcing someone to pay for something that may not be medically necessary or necessary at all. And so that feels like financial gain. So therapy needs a financial gain. So you can't, it always made sense to me. And then I talked to this therapist one time. She's like, well, I always require 10 before I'll clear anyone. And I was like, wow. And we kind of talked about, I said, does that feel, kind of ethically icky to you? And she was like, I never thought of it that way. I'm like, because how could you know? You're also, again, that fat bias, you're assuming that everyone who's obese has an eating disorder. And that's very problematic as well, because there's an underlying metabolic condition that is the factor in most obesity. So you have to also kind of check some of your own stuff to make sure, like all types of therapy, to make sure that's not coming up for you. And I go over a lot of this too in the training, just to some of that implicit bias stuff, just to kind of go over like, how do I feel about that? Or what, if you had maybe personal experience with a parent and the feeling was they were lazy or they didn't care, are you going to bring that implicit bias into the therapy room, which you want to be careful. But
so interesting. Yeah, because I was wondering about that piece specifically, like the follow-up care, and if you had to be involved in it, because you were saying, if you want to be a traveler, you could just do these assessments and be done with it, like one and done.
Yes. So I will add to that. Usually I do not make recommendations surrounding how much therapy or treatment they need. What I say is that they need an evaluation to figure out level of care appropriateness, and then follow through on treatment recommendations. Because if I put in that letter that they have to go through residential eating disorder treatment and their insurance says they don't meet criteria, I essentially barred them from ever having surgery, because who can come up with 30 grand for a month worth of residential? And if they're saying they really need PHP or IOP, fabulous. So I always word it in a way that's more like, I want you. So with the one that I just worked on with the gambling, I just wanted him assessed first. Let's get you assessed. Let's see what the local, and his was more some other behavior in addition to the gambling, but it was, let's get you assessed by the local compulsory behavior clinic. Let's see where you fall on that. If they say we can run it concurrent, we'll run it concurrent. But if we can't, then, we'll get that treatment. And then I want you to come back to me once that's completed. And so I think that is, what is best for us, so that we're not.
It's just so interesting, because there's just so many questions about that, because what did they say? Hell no, I'm not going to treatment. I'm not doing that, and it's like, but you have to do your due diligence with the assessment.
And they have made their choice, and they, just like they have human autonomy, They have the autonomy to say, I'm not going to go to further treatment. And I always say that it's totally up to you. If you'd like to get a second opinion by another evaluator, you are allowed to do that. Your surgeon will receive a copy of this to know how I've evaluated you. But we have to move forward. And sometimes I just try to work with some of that just to figure out, like, tell me what you're most nervous about seeking out treatment. And is it the delay factor? And so obviously someone who's struggling with impulsive stuff, it probably feels like I'm pulling what they want further away from them. So that would make sense. And so we talk about, unnecessary suffering. These behaviors are getting you in trouble. And it seems to me, if I didn't recommend getting help with that, you're going to have unnecessary suffering. You're going to continue to suffer from this process. And that's not fair to you to say, okay, you can have this surgery and then still be having all this suffering, when I could have helped you get into the treatment to stop that suffering and then get you well and get this.
Exactly. Right. Wow. Yeah, that is so interesting. Oh my gosh. It's smart. And it seems like, if they did your training, they'd be really well versed around all this stuff and be able to jump right into doing these assessments. And it sounds like there's a million bariatric surgeons out there that you can connect with and really get a good referral resource going there.
Yep. Especially with SciPac and some of where people are going multi-state. I stick with Florida just because I got enough down here to keep me busy. But for especially even Florida, we have that telehealth license. And I think is it New Hampshire that has it too?
Yeah, New Hampshire and I think South Carolina, and there's one other state that just approved it. Maybe West Virginia just approved it too.
So especially for Florida, it's super easy to get licensed down here. So, I think that because it's such a clear who do you need to market to, that's really helpful. So if you know that you are licensed in the state of Montana, well, you need to look up all the bariatric surgeons in the state of Montana and make contact, because chances are they are looking for you, because they can't move forward if they don't have us. So
that's national, that they have to, it's not state to state around that. Okay.
No, so it's an insurance requirement. And for most bariatric surgeons, it's just a personal requirement. They want to make sure they're not getting anything that may also get worse. So if someone is, for instance, struggling with bulimia, they're at an increased risk for esophageal issues. And part of the surgery, we don't want to increase, we want to decrease the likelihood of cancers and other kind of esophageal issues. And so we need to know that. Oftentimes, almost all surgeons nowadays will do an endoscopy as a part of their clearance. And so I've had one surgeon who has reached out to me kind of separately to say, I think there's some evidence of something going on here that I don't think is naturally occurring. I do think this client is struggling with bulimia, and I don't know how to bring that up or talk to them about it. And so we talked about, just focusing. And it was interesting. He wasn't looking for me to do an evaluation. He was literally looking at another human to be like, how do I humanistically help this person understand? I'm not trying to, out them or anything. I really think we need to get this addressed. And so we talked about motivational interviewing, some like basic things, and kind of being very factual about it too, to be like, this is what I see. And from a medical perspective, this is not naturally occurring. And I think maybe there's something going on more. Is there anything that you think this might be? And so again, by being able to talk to that surgeon, who's very, honestly, I think upset. He was just upset because he was nervous for her, because he kind of knew the outcome of that if they don't get it taken care of. That, again, he knows in his mind that if he needs something from me, he can reach out. And that's a good, again, that networking and business relation building that, sometimes our surgeons may reach out to us and ask us questions, and that's good, because that surgeon, I also now know, isn't just about money. He was willing to say, I'm not going to do this surgery to help protect you from your health. And, I think that was really good for me to know about him too.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh. I think this is so smart. And I just think people listening, especially therapists that are a little bit burned out with, intense caseloads and that sort of thing. This is such a great idea. Just like, it's almost like an EAP assessment in a way. It's kind of like light, like you just do the assessment and then you're done, like you said, one and done, if you want to be. I mean, it sounds like you can be way more involved if you want to be also, but so smart. Yeah, I just love this. So how would people work with you? Like, how does the course work? Is it a course or how does
Sure.
that?
Yeah. So it is self-paced. It's online. It's through Teachable. If anyone wants to do a course, Teachable has been awesome. So you actually make it self-paced, and that way you buy into it. You complete it as you have time. Again, if you're traveling, if you're sitting, I'm about to sit on a 8-hour flight. It's all self-paced, which is great. And then at the end, there's templates. So all of the templating, which to me is what you're really paying for, is the templating.
Right.
If you are someone who already is a bariatric surgeon if you're a bariatric surgeon, if you're a bariatric therapist and you're just looking for templating, my website, actually, you can a la carte buy the templates. It ends up being more expensive to buy all the templates a la carte because I want to encourage people to take the training and not just buy the eval so that they understand how it's set up and understanding of that. But it's learnbariatric-psychological-assessments.com. Again, SEO, you want to put what it is, everywhere. And then enroll now takes you to the course, and templates takes you to templates. And then it actually does talk a little bit about, I have some blog posts about traveling and burnout. Bariatric patients who themselves are bariatric patients and want to work with the population. And then again, that networking and everything is in there as well. So it's again, kind of my hopes is to be all encompassing. Eventually, I'm going to put it out. So now I have to do it. Eventually, I would like to make a directory. That's ultimately my goal, is so that clients can just find one place to go, because they get incredibly frustrated. Oftentimes, by the time they call me, if they're not coming directly through a surgeon, they have called potentially 50 to 100 therapists who do not do this. And so they're just going down the list. They're making it bigger and bigger. The Panhandle of Florida, it's about 7 hours away by car. I had a bariatric surgeon who's brand new, and his someone from his office just called me yesterday, and she was like, "Ashlyn, I got to tell you, I have called everyone in this, every therapist I could find in the surrounding, it's a very rural area, the surrounding like 8 counties. She's like, I'm so glad I found you, and I better understand that you can take volume, you can handle some volume, because they're looking at a little bit of volume. Also, the funny thing of the universe will kind of line you up with funny stuff. I was delayed for talk about travel. I was delayed 4 hours going to Vegas to see Adele. That was the best concert.
Oh, wow.
And I'm sitting across. So we get off the plane. I'm sitting across, and I tell my friend, I said, that is a bariatric surgeon right there. And she's like, how do you know? I was like, I recognize her from Instagram. And she's a very big one on Instagram. And I go over and I'm like, oh, hi, I'm Ashlyn Douglass. She's like, oh, yes. And so I didn't want to bother her, but literally for 4 hours, she sat. She was like, let me see this course. Show it. I want to make sure. So she's looking through it. She's like, change this, do that. I'm like, oh, this is perfect. And I kept trying to go away to like give her time. She's like, no, come back. Let's talk more about this. Or this is what I'm thinking.
Wow.
So again, traveling helped like set me up. There's no other way I would have been in the same space as her, other than we were both going to Vegas to see Adele. She was seeing her the day before I was. It's again, by my ability to travel and go do fun things, happened to be, in the Orlando airport with her. So it's definitely one of those things. And bariatric surgeons tend to be a little more personable than the average surgeon.
Interesting.
Because they tend to run their own clinics. So they are the face of the clinic. There's who's actually seeing the patient. This isn't always the bariatric clinic that I had. They had a bariatric PCP who we saw, and then we only saw the surgeon one time. Very, very good surgeon, but very surgeon-y and not very personal. Very skilled, very surgeon-y. Anyone who's dealt with surgeons know they're very smart. But bariatric surgeons tend to be a bit more personable. Which is nice because you can have conversations and interact with them a bit more than maybe your average, GI surgeon who's doing all sorts of things. You may also, depending on your area, you may have general surgeons who perform bariatric surgery in addition to other things they do. So it may not be. So I know where I used to live in the Panhandle, we had one surgeon who did bariatrics, but he also was the one who fixed everybody's hernias and gallbladders. And just be aware of that. They may not just do bariatrics, especially in rural areas. It may be the guy that also or gal that also does, everybody's hernia and gallbladder removal, because they're
Interesting.
general surgeons. There is a specialty for bariatrics, but just kind of like in plastics, where sometimes people are plastic surgeons who aren't board certified in plastic surgery. Same thing can occur in bariatrics. So
interesting. Yeah, that's good to know too, because some people might be listening and be like, oh, I don't want to cold call all these surgeons, but to hear they might be a little more like down to earth, have their own businesses and like you said, really need you. They really need you. And that's like part of marketing too, is like knowing that they need your services and not feeling like you're pushing yourself on people,
Yeah. And the front desk people I always tell, do not underestimate the people that are answering the phone, because that's who's talking to the client who says, I've called 50 people and I'm giving up. I can't do this anymore, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, wait. I have someone's card somewhere. I have her number in my phone. Try this person. I know she takes your Medicaid.
Nice.
So those are the people. I very rarely talk to the surgeons unless there's a specific issue. It's my front desk people. Sometimes there's also patient advocates. So they're the one who organize everything in larger offices. I will befriend them as well. So I'll usually ask the office, I'll explain what I do and I said, how do you guys normally set it up? Do you have patient advocates? Do you handle everyone? Does the surgeon handle them themselves? Or they'll say, oh, his PA is usually the one who does this. I'm like, cool. Can I meet the PA? Can I come back? Can I bring lunch for the office? What I found too, a lot of these offices are pretty small. So if you offer to bring lunch, like I brought like Panera catering. It wasn't that much. Nice. It was like 6 people in the office. And a business expense, and you get to have lunch too. And those tend to be where I can show them an example. So I have a fake, I made one up. I think it's Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck, where I have what my evals actually look like, so they can see what they look like. My recommendations work, so I can talk with them a bit more. This is how recommendations work. If it's a requirement, it's this way. If it's a recommendation, it's this way. Even if I think they have dementia or something going on, I've never had a client come in that way. Even if I did, my recommendation would be neuropsych. So I'm not the endpoint. Neuropsych can deem if they can give consent or not. I don't necessarily have to. So again, even though that's red, it isn't really, because they have something to do next. But I kind of explain what they would see if that was the issue. And then I can also pick their brains. Different surgeons have very different opinions about marijuana. I have one surgeon that's no marijuana. You're not allowed to smoke marijuana for a year. If you smoke marijuana, I won't do surgery on blah, blah, blah. And I have one guy, he's like, I don't like them to smoke it on the day they come to surgery. I'm like, oh, great.
Try not to be high when we sedate you, but
he's like, because the anesthesia guy doesn't like that. I'm like, okay. So I have some surgeons that are like, can you please educate them to switch from smoking to edibles, because smoking has less of an ulcer risk. I have another surgeon that's like, I don't want you telling them nothing about nothing. You just need to tell them to quit smoking the marijuana. And so I kind of know in my head when someone comes in, like, okay, this is the surgeon who really isn't a fan of marijuana, or this is the one that doesn't really care. So I'll educate them about it. Because in Florida, we have medical use. We probably are on the cusp of recreational. And it's just kind of it's touchy surgeon to surgeon. So again, you kind of want to ask some of those questions. I never ask the surgeons directly unless there's like one I did. But so usually their patient advocates, their PAs are going to tell me like, oh, he's a no marijuana guy, or so that way, again, how do they want a lot of information surrounding that. And it has to do with ulcer risk in this case. So I understand for the one, he just doesn't want to increase risk for ulcers, and that's all smoking. So and that way too, they know, oh, you're thinking about that. About ulcer risk. They need to that we talk about tinctures and edibles and all that. So it kind of lets them know, like, I'm kind of know what I'm talking about. And then the other good thing is that we have a pretty good governing body. The ASMBS, the American Society of Metabolic and Bariatric Surgery. We have a conference every year. It's going to be in Vegas this year. Which, I'm not a fan of Vegas, but that's okay.
Yeah, me either.
A lot of suffering. I don't know. As a therapist, Vegas is not my favorite place. But we have a conference. There's always a mental health component. It's usually in the pre-conference, which is good because I need to travel then to the PSI conference for my postpartum certificate because I'm out of CEUs there. So I'm lining everybody kind of up soon. But it's good. We get together. You meet other bariatric therapists. You find a referral network. I know locally for me, I have a lot of therapists that hate doing the evals, but they love doing the ongoing. So I'm like, great, have them. And I know who's self-pay and who takes insurance and who's really good with this or who's really good with that. Who's a sexologist who also does bariatrics for clients that struggle with that post-surgery, who really loves substance abuse for cross addiction. So that's kind of our networking and get together. We're a pretty tiny group. So most of us kind of know each other, which is nice. Not everyone within the profession has had bariatric surgery themselves. So a lot of times I'll have therapists that ask me like, I haven't had surgery myself. Like, is that a deal breaker for people? No. Most of the time, most clients don't know I had surgery unless they directly ask.
Right.
Because they never knew me when I was heavy. They only knew me as I am now. So I think that that's not a deal breaker. It's just like all other areas. You don't need to have schizophrenia to help people who have schizophrenia.
Right.
You don't need to have an eating disorder to help treat patients who struggle with those. So I think it's one of those things, just need education and you'll get more comfortable, and again, these clients, most of them will never interact with mental health again. They have no history of anything, or at least they tell you like they got nothing about nothing. So from the biopsychosocial standpoint is pretty good.
Nice. Well, thank you so much. This has been so informative, and I think it's really going to help a lot of therapists that might be feeling pretty stuck right now with just big, huge caseloads. This is like a great out, I think, like a great way to lighten the load and still help people, and then be able to really, like you said, do it just 1 or 2 days a week, and then you've got the rest of the week to do whatever you want. Yeah. And this sounds like there's a huge high need for this too.
Yep. And I will be adding a coupon code for anyone from specifically the podcast. If you use the coupon code TRAVEL, it will take $50 off the training. So it's TRAVEL for that coupon code. So if anyone listening would like to do the training, it's learnbariotric.psychological-assessments.com.
I love that. And we'll put it all in the show notes too, so you guys can click right through and access it if you want to.
Awesome.
Thank you, Ashlyn.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you so much for listening to the Traveling Therapist podcast. For show notes, links, and downloads, head over to thetravelingtherapist.com, where you'll be able to learn more about my journey, the courses I've created for you, and other exciting resources to make your dreams become a reality. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share with your traveling therapist friends, subscribe to the podcast, and if you loved this episode, please leave a review.